a young pioneer girl held captive on the wildest frontiers of the American West. Olive Oatman eventually returned to the people she'd been taken from, but her distinctive facial tattoos marked her as a curiosity. Her story? It's anything but straightforward. In many ways, the Oatmans were like any other pioneer family, driven to seek a new start via social and religious movements. According to Intimate Frontiers, they were part of a group known as the Brewsterites, who left Independence, Missouri in August 1850. The family had started from Illinois, consisting of Father Royce, Mother Mary Ann, and their 7 children, as told by a text with the ominous and slightly spoilery name of the Oatman Massacre. According to Brigham Young University Library, the Brewsterites were followers of Latter-day Saints church member James C. Brewster. After the death of LDS founder and prophet Joseph Smith, Brewster claimed that he was also receiving messages from on high. The communication supposedly told Brewster that he was supposed to lead the faithful to the Promised Land and found a city called Bashan in the Rio Grande Valley. Yet arguments arose and many of Brewster's followers left him and continued on to California. The Oatmans likewise split from Brewster along the way, but they would never make it to the West Coast.
They ain't gonna do this all day. This'll tell the tale.
According to the Blue Tattoo, the first real problems for the Oatman family began after they entered the New Mexico territory. The Brewsterites disagreed about who should be the leader of the enterprise, and while Royce Oatman was ultimately appointed captain by Brewster, the two men butted heads and eventually decided to part ways. Royce led a little more than half the group farther west into the territory, but the way proved to be tough with difficult terrain, horse thieves, harsh weather, dwindling supplies, and hostile native people. At Maricopa Wells in what's now Arizona, the group was warned to avoid the trail ahead, given reports of attacks by the Quinson and the forbidding landscape. Most of the members of the group stayed put, but Royce, unable or unwilling to wait for better conditions, forged ahead with only his family. In her account of the incident shared in Captivity of the Oatman Girls, Olive said that her father was worried about their lack of food and vulnerability to attack, even if they stayed at Maricopa Wells, so on they went. As they traveled along the trail, the Oatmans became increasingly isolated and vulnerable. In an account she later gave to the Sacramento Daily Union in 1856, Olive Oatman gives scant details about the attack itself. Captivity of the Oatman Girls, published in 1857, gives more detail, but it's worth mentioning that the journal, Prospects, says it may have been overly influenced by a preacher named Royal B. Stratton. At any rate, the 1857 narrative states that a group of native men approached the family one evening while they camped near the Gila River. The men smoked with Royce, then asked for food. Noting his family's dwindling supplies, Royce declined to give them more than a small amount of bread. This seemed to cause the attack, and the men began violently clubbing the Oatmans. Olive later said that she was struck blind and senseless, though not so thoroughly that she didn't see the destruction of her parents and 5 of her 6 siblings. Only younger sister Mary Ann was seemingly spared. Olive later identified the attackers as Tonto Apache, but as the Oatman Massacre argues, the assailants were more likely members of the Tocopaya tribe of the western Yavapai. 11-year-old Olive Oatman and her 7-year-old sister Mary Ann were taken captive, and as reported in Captivity of the Oatman Girls, were forced to march to a remote camp. Harsh as their treatment may have been, the practice of taking captives was nothing new. Tocopayas, along with other tribes, were known for occasionally taking women and children as captives, reports the Oatman Massacre. Whatever the reason for their captivity, Olive and Mary Ann were eventually put to work in a Tocopaya settlement, facing beatings if they did not follow commands. Though Olive and Mary Ann assumed that everyone else in their family had been killed, their teenage brother Lorenzo had survived. As Lorenzo recalled it, he had been badly injured, then kept reviving and losing consciousness in the hours after the attack. He was eventually able to gather enough strength to trek back to a settlement where, upon hearing his story, a group traveled back to the scene of the attack. They found the remains of 6 of the Oatman family, but no sign of Olive or Mary Ann. Olive and Mary Ann Oatman's time with the Yavapai was difficult, but after about a year with the tribe, they were to change location yet again. According to Oatman's account, Topeka, the daughter of a Mohave chief, took pity on the abused girls during a previous encounter with the Yavapai. She brokered a trade for the two and effectively adopted them into her family. In the story as it was filtered through Royal B. Stratton, however, Olive remained suspicious. From her perspective, it was very possible that she and her sister were to be handed over for yet more abuse. However, that assumption would be proven thoroughly wrong. Upon their arrival in the Mohave village, Topeka's family greeted the group warmly and served the girls food, as recorded in the Blue Tattoo. Their appearance was even marked by singing and dancing, and everyone gathered was told to always help the new arrivals and to treat them well. At this point, Olive Oatman's story becomes increasingly tangled. In Captivity of the Oatman Girls, the narrative consistently refers to her and her sister as captives and emphasizes the harshness of their lives. Yet, though Olive would later claim that the Mohave kept her against her will, evidence indicates that she and Mary Ann were effectively considered tribal members and could leave at any time. The California Historical Quarterly says that's certainly what she first told newspaper reporters. Then there was the matter of the tattoo. When she returned to white society, Olive came with an impossible-to-miss series of lines tattooed on her chin. As the blue tattoo notes, she also sported similar marks on her upper arms. Far from marking her as an inferior captive, these were designs worn by other Mohave women. She also received both a clan association and a potentially lewd nickname that further marked her as one of the group. According to the Oatman massacre, Olive even declined to approach railroad surveyors who were in close contact with the tribe in February 1854. At no point during this time did Olive or Mary Ann try to escape. Neither is there any evidence that the Mohave hid the two girls from the workers. Certainly this incident is conveniently left out of any of Olive's statements after her return. The 1855 harvest was especially poor for the Mohave, according to the blue tattoo. Everyone in the tribe was reduced to foraging and parceling out increasingly meager reserves to make it through the difficult times. Even so, numerous people in the village died, including children. Mary Ann eventually died of malnutrition, and Olive believed that she was the last member of her family alive. Accounts maintain that Mary Ann was mourned not only by her biological sister, but by other members of the tribe too, who made sure that Mary Ann was properly buried. What's more, they are credited with saving Olive's life, feeding her from a cache of cornmeal intended for future use before she suffered the same fate as Mary Ann. About 5 years after she was abducted, Olive Oatman's time with the native people was nearly over. It began with the arrival of Francisco, a Quinson man. He carried a message that the people at Fort Yuma had heard rumors of a white woman living nearby. Fearing reprisal, the Mohave encouraged Olive to leave for the fort. As the Oatman massacre reports, that worry was warranted. Francisco reportedly said that natives were in mortal danger if they didn't produce this white woman. He claimed that white people were preparing to kill the tribe if Olive remained hidden. A council debated keeping her, releasing her, or even killing Olive to cover up her existence. However, a gentler version was related to anthropologist Alfred Kroeber by Mohave tribal member Takwatha. He said that Francisco went straight to the chief, who expressed serious reluctance to let Olive go. She was well-liked and effectively a family member. But even so, they worried about further harm if more people were to come looking for her. Eventually, Olive traveled to Fort Yuma and was recovered there in 1856. She was reunited with her brother Lorenzo, and as the California Historical Quarterly notes, was given numerous offers of support from private citizens and the state of California. However, a few followed through with actual help, and her remaining family members certainly weren't rich. Olive would have to figure out how to support herself long-term. Olive Oatman's experiences might have remained obscure if it weren't for an opportunistic preacher named Royal B. Stratton. According to the journal Prospects, it's not entirely clear how Stratton became involved with the Oatman siblings, but he somehow ended up taking dictation from both Olive and Lorenzo to create Captivity of the Oatman Girls. The way Oatman's story was presented played into existing prejudices and preconceptions about supposedly savage indigenous people and their interactions with civilized white settlers. It also apparently played into Stratton's need to be a literary stylist, with dramatic flourishes and florid speeches that may or may not ever have happened.
I thought my job was to tell the public the truth. The facts, pretty or not.
With comparisons made between Captivity of the Oatman Girls and earlier accounts given directly by Olive herself, it's clear that Stratton took some liberties. That's left the truth a little elusive. Contemporary reports state that Olive Oatman was clearly upset upon her return to white society. There is some circumstantial evidence that Olive Oatman never fully moved on. According to the blue tattoo, she later suffered from persistent headaches and depression, perhaps linked to both her family's deaths, her departure from the Mohave, and her subsequent status as something of a sideshow attraction.
I thought I'd have myself a nice Mormon husband when I was grown, a family of sister wives.
What about the oftentimes racist Captivity of the Oatman Girls? Olive may have only teamed up with Stratton to earn a living. Margot Mifflin, author of The Blue Tattoo, notes that Olive had to navigate her post-Mohave life as a single woman with little education and little chance of marriage, given her tattooing. Capitalizing on the tattoo and the story that went with it, even to the point of stretching the truth and playing to readers' assumptions, helped her earn a living.
Instead, I got this marked up face.
Though many things came together to make Olive Oatman a celebrity in her time, her tattoos were undoubtedly one of the most striking things about her experience. For white audiences, the dark blue lines on her chin were utterly shocking. Eventually, she falsely claimed that they were a mark of enslavement, and newspaper accounts breathlessly spoke of the horrors of forcing disfigurement upon an innocent young woman, reports Western American literature. If nothing else, it surely helped her to sell tickets to her lectures. If you were to ask a Mohave person, however, chances are good that they would have scoffed at such an idea. After all, weren't most people in the tribe tattooed in just such a manner? And as the blue tattoo notes, Mohave people had to choose to receive tattoos. They were never forced upon anyone, captive or otherwise. In fact, many tribal members reportedly believed that the markings were necessary for Mohave people to recognize each other in the afterlife. Within that context, Olive's tattoos make it clear that she was part of Mohave society, both in the world of the living and of the dead. In 1865, nearly 10 years after her return, Olive Oatman married rancher John Fairchild. According to the Blue Tattoo, she moved with him first to Michigan, then Texas. Their marriage was, by all accounts, a peaceful, loving relationship, though it required a somewhat dramatic break from the past before the couple could move forward. Olive's new husband reportedly burned as many copies of Captivity of the Oatman Girls as he could before the wedding. He may also have encouraged her abrupt break with Stratton, which happened around the time of her marriage. The Fairchilds ultimately settled into a quiet life in Sherman, Texas. The pair never had biological children, though they did adopt a daughter. Often described as fairly shy, the older Olive Oatman Fairchild rarely spoke of her experiences with the Mohave people, though she undertook charity work with orphans that echoed her own parentless status. Her obituary mentioned that she sometimes wore a veil to conceal her tattoo. The effects of her trauma appear to have dogged Olive throughout her life. In private letters, the older Olive sometimes even wrote of her long-dead family, telling one friend in 1882 that, "I long to have my dear mother back." She died in Sherman, Texas in 1903.